Evolution has spent a long time finding ways for living creatures to communicate, but nothing is as powerful or as mysterious as the human brain. 80 billion neurons wire the brain, and each cell is connected chemically and electrically with 10,000 others. At give or take 100 trillion synapses, the brain is the world's most complex network, loaded with more dynamic interconnections than there are stars and planets in the Milky Way.
If you wanna be my friend, you want us to get along, please do not expect me to wrap it up and keep it there.
There's a new way of thinking about teaching. And the new way of thinking about learning and teaching involves neuroscience. It involves understanding individual differences in children, which we've had several discussions of. It involves curriculum, which we've worked on. I'm going to call that the what of teaching we've worked on as educators for the last 25 years. But it also, as Nathan said, it also involves technology, interaction, game playing, making learning, getting to learning a different way, and making it more interactive, making it more motivating. And I'm going to try and summarize a lot of what you've heard today in that respect. So the new science of learning is incorporating all of these disciplines and allowing us to understand every single student and focusing on how every student learns, not how all students learn, but to think of students individually and think of their individual learning capacities. You've had enough lectures on the brain. I'm not going to go through too many of these areas with you again. You've had lots of them. But keep in mind that it is the left hemisphere that we educate for the most part. So the right hemisphere, as we heard, is very important for social skills. When we have children on the autism spectrum, when we have children who have the STEM children that we heard about just a few minutes ago, one of the difficulties they have is with right hemisphere capabilities of what we call theory of mind, being able to think about how other people think, being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And that's a big part of the social world, and actually it's what is learned through game playing. It's one of the major things you learn through game playing is, what is that next person's move going to be? Where do I want to go now? They want to win as much as I do. What can I do? What can they do? Game playing is a wonderful way to build the right hemisphere. But most of education deals with left hemisphere skills. And the left hemisphere skills are reading, mathematics, geography, all sorts of sciences, and they involve symbols. And ultimately what we are getting to in neuroscience to a great extent is how the left hemisphere deals with symbols in children who have trouble learning symbols, whether it's learning the letter that goes with a sound if they're going to read, or learning the numeral that goes with a concept if it's on your fingers, as you heard today, but the concept of number, what we call the number sense. That dealing with symbols gets to be very problematic for some students. And that's because symbol learning involves integration.
Dopamine is not about pleasure, it's about the anticipation of pleasure. It's about the pursuit of happiness rather than happiness itself. And what's most remarkable is experimentally, if you block that rise of dopamine from occurring, you don't get the work. You don't get the behavior. This is not only the anticipation, but this is what is capable of eliciting goal-directed behavior.
So the example will be, what strategies, knowing that there was a big issue of frustration and boredom, when are our kids least frustrated and bored? When are they most engaged? Video games, okay, that didn't take a whole lot of research on my part. They persevere with challenge. They don't say, I don't get it, and walk away. And they use feedback to improve. Okay, this is great. We know the brain is capable of it. Now, what is it in the video game model that we can transplant into the classroom? I found 3 commonalities. Achievable challenge, chances to make predictions with immediate feedback on whether they're right or wrong, and feedback about their incremental progress. Urge is pleasure. The pull of dopamine, when dopamine is elevated, you get some pretty neat things in the brain. Pleasure, decreased stress, curiosity, increased tension, motivation. And in the time I talked about it, when stress is high and sustained or frequently high, you get some changes. Well, when dopamine is frequently or repeatedly high, the brain starts changing and we find increased perseverance and increased memory. So I'll show you a list of things that raise dopamine that we're not going to talk about now. What we're going to talk about is the powerful one in the video game model, the intrinsic satisfaction of making a correct prediction. And this is what I'm going to share with you. Dopamine comes out, showers the brain when it recognizes that it made a correct prediction. So let's see if your brain seeks the pleasure of making a correct prediction. I want you to take your paper and you're going to write down 2 things on your paper. One is to predict whether you would rather have 1 cent doubled every day for 30 days, the amount you'd have at the end of 30 days. The other choice would be, would you rather at the end of 30 days have $100,000? So that is your prediction. And you could write down the cent sign or the dollar sign. Would you rather have 1 cent doubled or $100,000? Now part 2, if you don't answer part 2, it's like a hanging chad. Your vote doesn't count. On part 2, regardless of what you chose for part 1, write down your estimate of what the total amount would be at the end of 30 days if the 1 cent was doubled. So whether you chose it or not, you write down that prediction. So you're going to have 2 things on your paper, your iPod, when you hold it up. Your choice, the cent or the dollar, and your estimate of what that amount would be, $1 million, $10 million, $5, whatever. And when you're finished, when you have 2 things written down, hold it up, I'll acknowledge it, and you put it down. That's how my classes, I don't teach now, I teach you, but my classes, everyone would respond to every question, but through a clicker, a whiteboard, holding something up that I'd see, no one else would. But only the person who thinks learns. Only the person who bets cares about the answer. Okay, see yours, so you get to put them down. Got it, got it, got it. Yes, good. Thank you. Very good. This side, and that's cut. See it? And you see how I know wait time by doing this? Everyone's accountable. Nobody's embarrassed. And your brains made a bet. Predictions are more powerful on the brain when they're up to the level of a bet. By writing it down and then showing me, you really raise the stakes on that bet. So that's the power of prediction. So I'm going to go on to the next topic, that of brain chemical equations. I see people shaking their heads. Is there a concern? What? You want the answer to the math question. Now, I'll remind you that I'm not giving you any money, and the answer is math, so it's exponents. Many of you don't like math. So yet, you really want the information. Okay, I'll show it to you first because you actually won't be able to think of anything else until I show it to you. Because I knew that you'd want to know your prediction, and there are no brain chemical equations coming up. Here you go. 5 million plus. So, here's the deal. Can't leave it up because I want to conclude, but that's dopamine. The brain wants to make predictions, not even when you know the prize isn't real. You want to make those bets because when you do, the intrinsic reinforcement of having your prediction be right just bathes the brain in dopamine. And it's worth it to your brain to be wrong, as long as no one sees, for the chance to be right.